Online with Terry Jeffrey, a CNS News production.
Hi, welcome to this edition of Online with Terry Jeffrey. Our guest today is Governor Gary Johnson. Johnson was born in Minot, North Dakota and grew up in New Mexico. After graduating from the University of New Mexico, he built one of the largest construction companies in the state, hiring more than 1,000 employees. He went 2 terms as governor of New Mexico, serving in that office from 1995 to 2003. He is now seeking the Republican presidential nomination for the 2012 presidential election. Governor Johnson, thanks for coming in.
Terry, great to be on. And, one of my real passions in life is also mountain biking. So I just completed the Leadville 100-mile mountain bike this last Saturday, and that was about as painful a human experience as I've ever had.
You biked 100 miles in one day?
Well, on a mountain bike. Now, this is on a mountain bike. So my 8th time doing Leadville. My slow time up until this year was 10 hours, 18 minutes. Saturday was 11 hours, 13 minutes.
Where is Leadville exactly?
Leadville, Colorado. So low altitude, 10.5, high altitude, 13.
Really?
Yeah.
So your lungs are doing okay, huh?
They're doing all right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think I read that you are a triathlete.
And in my lifetime, I have summited Mount Everest, which was a great adventure, I have to tell you. Stand on top of the planet.
I suspect one thing that President Obama is going to have in common with you over the next few days is he's going to be riding a bicycle.
You think?
All right, let me ask you about this, Governor. Earlier this year, President Obama's National Fiscal Commission, which he had appointed, came back with a report that described the fiscal situation that the country faced in very dire terms. They said, our nation is on an unsustainable fiscal path. Spending is rising, revenues are falling short, requiring the government to borrow huge sums each year to make up the difference. We face staggering deficits. In 2010, federal spending was nearly 20% of gross domestic product. Only during World War II was federal spending a larger part of our economy. By 2025, according to President Obama's commission, revenue will be able to finance only interest payments and Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Every other federal government activity, from national defense and homeland security to transportation and energy, will have to be paid for with borrowed money. Now, I have to say, I haven't really found Republicans or Democrats who really contest that description of the fiscal crisis we face. Do you contest the description that Obama's fiscal commission came up with?
No, not at all. And I'm promising to submit a balanced budget for the year 2013. We have to fix this. I do think it's absolutely unsustainable. I think we're on the verge of a financial collapse. And that would be a monetary collapse, and that would be the bond market that collapses, and that is simply due to the fact that there's no repaying $14 trillion in debt given our ongoing deficits, which, by the way, by the year 2020 are supposed to grow $11 more trillion. This is crazy. And Terry, this can be fixed. That's the lot of pain.
Sure, but let me clarify something. You just said you will submit a balance if you're elected.
I will submit. I promise to submit a balanced budget for the year 2013, and I promise
if you were elected, in other words, and inaugurated in January 20th, 2013.
Right.
For fiscal year 2013.
Well, whenever I get to submit my first budget. So I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the budgetary cycle like June? But
no, well, the federal fiscal year begins October 1st and it ends September 30th.
Okay.
So the president comes in the middle of a fiscal year.
Comes in the middle of the fiscal year. So when I get to submit for the next fiscal year, that will be my submission.
So for 2014, fiscal 2014, President Johnson would submit to Congress
a balanced budget,
plan that would balance the budget in 2013.
Yes.
2014.
Yes,
now,
exactly.
Now,
and you would say, well, they're gonna veto that budget. Well, okay, so they veto that budget. I promise to veto expenditures that exceed that balanced budget. Now, Congress overrides the veto. Well, guess what? I would have been elected promising to submit that balanced budget. I just put before you, we will come as a country closer to balancing that budget than if you elect a president that's going to promise to do that over a 15 or 20-year period, because that's the only prudent way to go about it.
Let's get into some of the practical details of this. As I just read, the President's Fiscal Commission says that by 2025, revenue, the entire federal revenue stream will be taken up by interest payments, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. I don't think anybody really contests that. Sometime thereabouts, maybe before, maybe that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you look at the daily Treasury statements, which are published every day by the Treasury, and they show exactly how much money the federal government has spent thus far in that fiscal year and that fiscal month on various items, including those items, you would see in recent months that, as some conservatives pointed out, that the revenue stream coming into the federal government at this point is sufficient on a month-to-month basis to pay the interest, pay these major entitlements, pay the federal employees' salaries. But once you get beyond that, quite frankly, Governor, you could, if you paid all those things, you would have to cut into defense. If you're going to,
yes. So I'm advocating a 43% reduction in military spending.
Right, but eliminate everything else. In other words, the revenue right now is enough to cover those things.
Well, you've got to cover Medicaid and Medicare, and then you got to go into military spending. So when it comes to Medicaid and Medicare, I am advocating that the federal government block grant the states a fixed amount of money, 43% less than what we're currently spending.
On Medicaid?
Medicaid, and leave the delivery of health care to the poor and those over 65 to the states. Now that means no strings, no mandates from the federal government to the states. Based on my experience in New Mexico with Medicaid, we reformed Medicaid, I believe, unquestionably, we could have delivered Medicaid in the state of New Mexico for 43% less than what we were spending if the federal government would have done away with the strings and the mandates. I believe that same phenomenon would apply to Medicare. But let's get back to get back to the states. 50 laboratories of innovation, 50 laboratories of best practice, as opposed to Washington top down, which has us in the position that we're in right now, which is bankruptcy.
But let's go through these entitlements because they are the main driver.
Yeah.
So you say Medicaid, you just take it, you give each state its share of the Medicaid budget.
Within a balanced context, which would be 43% less than what we're currently spending.
You cut the whole pie down 43%.
43%.
Divide it up among the states. Federal government's done with it. It's up to the state legislatures and the governors.
Of which I maintain there would be best practice. I maintain that with 50 states embarked on this whole competitive venture to deliver health care to the poor and those over 65, that we would actually have best practice and that we would actually have some fabulous success, we'd have some spectacular failure. We'd emulate the success, we would avoid the failure.
So the continuing federal role in Medicaid would be simply each year taking in federal tax dollars and passing back out to the states
if we don't,
their share of the money.
This is a way to address this.
Right,
now,
43% down. Okay, Medicare. Medicare is the largest single.
It is the boogeyman. It's the 800-pound gorilla.
Right. I mean, to put it in perspective, of the unfunded liabilities over the next 75 years, which equal about $62 trillion according to the Peterson Foundation, $38.8 trillion in unfunded liabilities come out of Medicare.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about that?
Well, the same thing. Block grant the states a fixed amount of money, 43% less than what we're currently spending, for Medicare, for the delivery. And by the way, as you know, this is a federal program. This is not a state's program. But hand this over to the states. Hand this over to the states. Do away with the strings. Do away with the mandates. If we don't do this, Terry, I'm just going to suggest we're going to all be left with nothing. We are going to have a monetary collapse.
When you say do away with the strings, with the states at least, Medicare, obviously you have every single person in America who works either pays a self-employment tax or a Medicare tax to the federal government, on the promise of the federal government that when they turn 65 and they retire.
And of course, the issue with that is that we all pay in a lot less money than we ultimately get paid out, which is unsustainable.
Which is what the unfunded liability is.
Exactly. Exactly.
Medicare going forward would be a transfer of wealth from younger taxpayers to older taxpayers who did not pay that much in tax.
A Ponzi scheme that has to come due at some point.
But Governor, given that you have the entire American working population, especially those who are approaching retirement, who've paid taxes for years to Medicare on the expectation that when they're that age in retirement, the government will cover their health care. I'm
maintaining that the states will fulfill that role, that there will be health care delivered for those over 65. Now, is that going to come with a reduction in Medicare? Yes, because if we don't reduce Medicare spending, if we don't get smarter when it comes to Medicare spending, I maintain we're going to find ourselves with nothing. We're going to find ourselves in the midst of this monetary collapse, which is very simply that our money won't buy a thing.
Okay, so you would say to the states, we're going to give you your share of Medicare minus 43% down from the current
Yes,
amount.
yes.
The one thing we're going to require you to do is you must provide a health care benefit.
A health care benefit, yes, very, very broadly defined, a health care benefit for those over 65.
And then the states would compete among each other, and perhaps you'd see
the notion of best practices, the notion that how do we go about this? How do we go about all those common sense things that we talk about every single day, like the fact that in the last few years of a person's life, that's where all the medical expenses end up accruing, really, when you look at the whole spectrum of medical expenses. When you look at bureaucracy and medical expenses, and perhaps argue that more than 50% of medical expense is bureaucracy.
Now, would the block grant be adjusted for inflation?
Well, you're picking at it, and adjusted for inflation, this has to be a reform that lives within our means, that balances the federal budget, something that has never happened in my lifetime. And by the way, this is ever since I have become aware of government and the fact that government takes in less money than what it spends, my entire life I've lived under the notion that at some point the bill would become due, that you can't continue to spend more money than what you take in.
Would it also, your block grant would also be adjusted on a per capita basis? For example, let's say that 30% of the seniors in America decide that Arizona is not only a nice place to live, it has a much better health care system under your program for seniors, so people start moving out of California.
This could be part of this competitive environment.
So they would get an increased block grant from the federal government because Arizona has an increased senior population.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, that makes sense.
All right, Social Security, same thing. Americans work their entire lives to pay payroll or self-employment taxes to Social Security with a promise from the government that when they reach a certain age, they will get a benefit.
So Social Security is a problem that is pale in comparison to Medicare. Social Security is a program that can be fixed. Very simply, it's a program that needs to take in more money than what it pays out. So without raising taxes, you could raise the retirement age, you could have a means testing, you could change the escalator built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. Those three things in and of itself make Social Security solvent into the future.
So you say now,
pale in comparison, small problem relative to Medicare.
Previously, Congressman Paul Ryan from Wisconsin, former Senator John Sununu from New Hampshire had proposed a Social Security reform that would allow people to take 6 points of their overall Social Security tax, which is 12.4%, and put it in a personal retirement account in which they could invest in rather broad-based mutual funds. And at the time of their retirement, they would be required under the law to buy an annuity that would pay the equivalent of a Social Security benefit. If there's any money left over, they could do whatever they want with it. Would you favor that kind of reform?
Absolutely, absolutely. So you could list a whole bunch of other reforms that I would absolutely tie my boat to.
One of the problems people have pointed out now politically with a Ryan Sununu type Social Security reform is even though it puts Social Security on a path to be solvent over the long run, according to the actuary of the Social Security Administration, it would cost about $1 trillion or so in the transition as people took that 6 points out of their payroll tax, and instead of using it to pay government expenses, including Social Security benefits, it would go into their mutual fund investments. Would that be an acceptable cost for you at this point?
You know, it's something I would have to look at, but this is all about balancing the budget, and with the notion that if we don't fix this, we're going to find ourselves with nothing.
But isn't it also about restoring the autonomy and self-reliance of individual Americans?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm also proposing scrapping the entire federal tax system that we currently have in lieu of the fair tax.
How would that work?
Well, it's a consumption tax, 23%, revenue neutral, does away with all federal tax except for what is the fair tax. By all free market economists' reckoning, this is really fair. It's what it says it is. Simplified, does away with the IRS, does away with income tax, does away with Social Security withholding, does away with Medicare withholding, does away with unemployment insurance. One-time federal tax replacing everything else everybody pays. Like I say, no more IRS, no more business-to-business tax, no more corporate income tax. It's revenue neutral, and For those that make more money, they're going to consume more and pay more tax and also promote savings.
Well, as you know, Governor, for much of the history of the United States, the federal government was run on consumption taxes in the form of excise taxes and tariffs, and there was not a national income tax. The Constitution was amended to allow the federal government to put a direct income tax on individuals. Would you push forward the consumption tax when the Constitution still authorized the federal government to have an income tax?
So this is fairtax.org. If you
Right.
get online, it's an actual legislative proposal that's been around for quite some time now. As part of the legislative proposal, it repeals the 16th Amendment.
So the federal government would be prohibited from having an income
Exactly.
tax going forward from that.
Exactly.
That's what you do on tax policy.
That's what. Well, and that's the reboot of the American economy. That's doing away with corporate tax. That's doing away with business-to-business tax. Why would you start a business anywhere in the world other than the United States, given that kind of a competitive environment?
Now, it's been said that the power to tax is the power to destroy. It's also the power to direct and control people's activity. By what even James Madison pointed out, that
right.
you could really destroy property rights by putting an inordinate tax on someone's property and not on another. And oftentimes, the inordinate tax would go on the politically favored group or interest, as
Which is the policies that we have today. This is what we perpetuate today with our tax policies. We give unfair advantages to groups, individuals, as opposed to a consumption tax where you get to actually vote now with your consumption. Are you going to pay the tax on X service or good if you choose to do that?
But would your consumption tax be universal, or would there be commodities and services that you would exempt from the consumption tax?
No, there can't be anything there can't be anything that.
So even a
that's
house,
exempt.
if someone was going to buy a house,
A new house, not the resale of the house. Now this proposal's been around for quite
Right.
some time. By all free market economists' reckoning, this is really the fair way to go. It is what it is. It's fair. It simplifies.
So you'd exempt a new house from the federal consumption tax?
No, you wouldn't.
You
A
wouldn't.
new house, you pay the federal consumption
One
tax.
time.
One time, exactly.
So on the
Same
resale,
with a car.
the resale, no.
Right.
Same with a car, any other thing?
Right. Business to business, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but that's okay. Business to business, there's no business to business tax. So if you were buying an automobile for your business, you would not pay the consumption tax on that automobile. If you resold that automobile, the tax never having been paid, at that point it would get paid. I'm not certain what that mechanism is.
All right. So ultimately what you're trying to do is target the end user.
Which is all of us.
Okay.
All of us. And again, promote savings. You could, and it also issues a prebate check to every American of $200 a month. So you and I would each get a $200 a month check, which would cover each of us up to the point of poverty to be able to pay the fair tax. So it's fair. It affects everyone equally. For those that are below the poverty level, they're going to get their fair tax paid for by the government, as is you and I.
So a poor person would go into a grocery store, and when they bought their loaf of bread and their gallon of milk, they'd actually pay the tax, but then they get a check from the government for $200.
We'd all get all of us.
Everyone-
Everybody gets a $200
which
check.
would effectively eliminate the tax that had been paid by the person at the poverty level. Okay. Now, a major issue with the Tea Party in the last election cycle, and most likely in the upcoming election cycle, was the proper role of the federal government within the legitimate constraints of the Constitution. Now, this was an issue that dates back to the ratification of the Constitution. When the Constitution went out from the Constitutional Convention of the states, a lot of people were especially worried about the General Welfare Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, which gave the power of the federal government to tax for the general welfare and to provide for the defense of the country. Then there were enumerated powers after that. But when there was concern about that, James Madison wrote in Federalist 45, quote, "The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution of the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former will be exercised principally on the external objects of war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce, with which the last power of taxation will for the most part be connected. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all objects which in the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state." Unquote. Now, do you basically agree with James Madison's
Yes, I do.
interpretation of the Constitution?
I'm a states' rights guy. I mean, I think George Bush declared himself a states' rights guy, but I think that that really didn't. We really didn't see that those actions. We heard the words, but we didn't see the actions.
Okay, when you look at the federal government today, where are those places where you most conspicuously believe they were violating the understanding of the Constitution that James Madison expressed when the Constitution was being ratified?
Well, certainly of late would be the passage of President Obama's health care plan, that we're somehow forced to buy health care from the government. I mean, to what end does that extend? To the automobiles that we buy? To the houses that we live in?
So the individual mandate's unconstitutional in your view?
In my view, yes.
Now,
the government telling me that I have to purchase something?
There was an interesting discussion in the last presidential debate among Republicans that you did not participate in, but essentially Mitt Romney former Governor Mitt Romney of Massachusetts made the argument that Obamacare may be unconstitutional because it violates the federal Constitution, but mandating that individuals buy health care in Massachusetts is not unconstitutional because it doesn't violate the Massachusetts Constitution. Do you believe that government, leaving aside the actual words of the Constitution, if free peoples are formulating a government, can they surrender to government the power to force them to buy a good or service?
Terry, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but when I was governor of New Mexico, I had the distinction of having vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I had thousands of line item vetoes as governor of New Mexico. Only 2 were overturned, so it made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. My point here is that I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I would have never passed a health care program in New Mexico that would have required New Mexicans to buy a certain product. Never. I wouldn't have done it. Constitution aside, it's not right for the government to tell me what I should or shouldn't buy.
So in your view, no level of government ought to tell individuals what they have to buy.
Because there's no end to that. There's no end to that logic. Whether that be a car, whether that be the food I eat. And by the way, I think government has a role to provide for education. I like the fact that calories are noted on food. I like the fact that here are the fats, here are the carbohydrates, here are the proteins that exist in a certain kind of food. That is information that the government has mandated that food manufacturers or preparers put on their food. But don't tell me what to eat. Well, don't tell me what to eat. Label it, fine.
Let me ask you, you find it acceptable for the federal government to tell corporations that are selling foodstuffs how they label their foodstuffs in the marketplace?
I do. I think that's an informational...
Where does that power come from?
Well...
where is it authorized in the Constitution?
Probably won't find it.
Well, I think some people, governor would argue that the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, which empowers the federal government to regulate interstate commerce, would allow the federal government, or at least that would be the justification, to regulate foodstuffs that were crossing state line in trade. Do you accept that argument?
No, well, no, I don't think they should be regulating foodstuffs. But back to information, I think the government can provide a huge.
Well, you don't think
can mandate information that allows you and I to disseminate that information and make the best choices in our own lives. But don't let the government make those choices. Give us the information to make those choices.
But Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the Commerce Clause, gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the states with the Indian tribes. That is what it says. You don't believe the federal government has the power to regulate food products that are traded between states. Someone creates a cereal in Michigan and they're selling it in Arizona, California, and Florida. You don't believe the Commerce Clause gives them the power to regulate that?
No, I'm certain that it does.
Okay.
Based on the tone of your question, you're saying that yes.
You don't dispute that the federal government has the power to regulate interstate trade,
right.
Just like it has the power to regulate trade between the United States and Mexico or the United States and France.
Right.
It does have that power.
Yes.
All right. Now, let's talk about social issues and cultural issues. Thomas Jefferson, who was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, later in his life wrote his fellow Virginian Henry Lee explaining where the Declaration came from, the ideas that inspired it. One of the things he said is that Cicero, the first century BC Roman senator, is one of the inspirations for the Declaration of Independence. Alexander Hamilton, who was Thomas Jefferson's great rival in those days in the Washington administration, sometimes used Cicero's middle name as a pseudonym. Russell Kirk, the great conservative scholar, said that Cicero had more influence over the founding fathers than any other classical thinker. And this is what Cicero wrote. He wrote, quote, "There is a true law, a right reason, conformable to nature, universal, unchangeable, eternal, whose commands urge us to duty and whose prohibitions restrain us from evil. Whether it enjoins or forbids, the good respect its injunctions and the wicked treat them with indifference. This law cannot be controlled by any other law and is not liable either to derogation or abrogation. Neither the Senate nor the people can give us any dispensation for not obeying this universal law of justice. It needs no other expositor or interpreter than our own conscience. It is not one thing at Rome and another at Athens, one thing today and another tomorrow, but in all times and nations, this universal law must forever reign eternal and imperishable. It is sovereign master and emperor of all things. God himself is its author, its promulgator, its enforcer. He who obeys it not flies from himself and does violence to the very nature of man," unquote. Now, are you with Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and agreeing with Cicero on that?
Well, yeah, and then my actions as governor of New Mexico. I vetoed 750 pieces of legislation as governor of New Mexico. Do we really need another law to declare what to me is obvious? And back to, I am a classical liberal. If you Wikipedia classical liberal, that is somebody who believes in less government, period. That is somebody who believes that the government, the best thing that government can do for you and I as individuals is empower you and I as individuals to make choices that only you and I should make. Because we're the ones that are involved. You start passing laws when it comes to decisions that you and I should be making, we find ourselves crossways with the law as opposed to common sense and what is best for you and I.
Right, but Governor, specifically what Hamilton and Jefferson and literally all of the founding fathers believed, and they wrote it in the Declaration of Independence, is that there is a God, that God has a natural moral law, that it applies to all men and all nations. They specifically believed that their natural rights and the natural law were being violated by the British in restricting their rights. Do you agree with that understanding of the law, that there is a God, and that ultimately the law of the state must be consistent with the law of God?
But when I see legislation passed that somehow has the Word of God attached to it, I don't think that that's legislation that should get passed.
Well, the founding fathers said that in the Declaration of Independence that all men are endowed with their Creator, by their Creator, with certain inalienable rights. Do you agree with the founding fathers on that?
Sure, certainly.
And they believed that their God-given rights were being violated by the British Parliament, which the British Parliament did not have a right to do. Do you believe that the state has a right to violate the God-given right of individuals?
No.
Okay, the state has a duty to protect the God-given rights of individuals.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, by God-given rights, I'm assuming do unto others as you would have others do unto you. This is my summation of good living, if you will.
Well, I think that epitomizes sort of at the core of the natural law. I think Thomas Aquinas in the Summa wrote that the natural law, the first rule is do no harm. And so let's talk about that in terms of the social and cultural issues that America faces. I don't think anybody disputes, and maybe you will, but I've not heard of people disputing that it is a biological fact that from the moment of fertilization, that there's an individual human being in a mother's womb. Do you dispute that that's a biological fact?
Well, I support a woman's right to choose up until viability of the fetus. The law of the land the law of the land supports a woman's right to choose up until viability of the fetus, and viability of the fetus is described as being able to sustain the life of the fetus outside of the womb, even if by artificial means.
But you would agree that there are a lot of wrong-headed federal laws that you'd like to do away with, and probably some wrong-headed Supreme Court decisions that like to reverse. But my first question to you is very specific. Do you dispute the biological fact that at the moment of fertilization, when a sperm meets an ovum and starts to divide, that there is a unique human life there?
Well, I would suggest...
Is it human?
I support a woman's right to make that choice. Fundamentally, more than anything, I believe that is a decision that only the woman involved should be making.
Is 2 + 2 4? Is 2 + 2 4?
Well, of course it is.
All right, now if a woman decides it's 5, is she right?
We agree to disagree on this subject. I support a woman's right to make a decision that I think only she should make.
I'm trying to determine your position on this. when a human sperm meets a human ovum in a woman's womb, starts to divide, is there a unique human life there?
Clearly, we agree to disagree on this issue. I support, fundamentally, I think that only a woman should make the choice when it comes to this issue.
But you're not answering my question. Is there a unique...
You're not this is an issue that we will never agree on, clearly. Clearly, we won't agree.
The biological fact of when human life begins, we won't agree on? I mean, certainly,
I think there's a science attached to that. That this is the moving target when it comes to the issue itself.
Are you a human life right now? Are you a human life? Yes. Do you have a God-given right to life right now? Did you have one the day you were born? You say viability. When you became viable, and I'm not sure that you know the day that it became viable, did you not have a God-given right to life the moment before you became viable?
Terry, what you're talking about is an issue that divides America. You're talking about an issue that amongst those that believe in a woman's right to choose and those that believe that life starts at the point of insemination, this is an area that we disagree on.
No, I think we did agree that with the Declaration of Independence that all men are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among them is the right to life. You agree with that? That all men are endowed by their Creator with the right to life.
Look, I've heard this. I've heard this.
Well, I thought I understood you to say that you agreed with what it says in the Declaration of Independence that all men are endowed by their Creator.
And what you're saying is that you would take this away from a woman. You would criminalize a woman who is making a choice that I believe only a woman should make.
Now, Governor,
and you may perhaps be criminalizing the activities of doctors involved also.
What I'm trying to isolate is where you believe the state has a duty and a function in protecting, which I think you conceded was an inalienable God-given right to life.
Well, in this case, the Supreme Court has ruled that a woman has the right to choose up until viability of the fetus, and they have defined that as being able to sustain the fetus outside of the womb, even if by artificial means.
I understand what the Supreme Court has ruled, but what I'm trying to determine is if you concede, as I believe you have, that all men are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, including the right to life, as a first premise. And as a second premise, you concede that the state has a duty. And the second premise you concede is that the state has a duty to protect the right to life. Okay, then it would seem to me that you're saying at some point it's okay for someone to go ahead and with the full sanction of the state take a human life.
This is a decision that only the woman involved should be making. And this is something that I fundamentally believe. So you get back to a person and what government should be providing individuals. Government should be providing individuals the ability to make choices that only they should make. And in this case, this is a decision that only the woman should be making. This is my opinion, Terry. You'll never change my opinion on this.
If you, in fact, were to get the Republican nomination and were facing President Barack Obama, your opponent, when he was a senator in the state of Illinois, was the lead opponent of the Born Alive Infant Protection Act in that state. And quite simply, there was a practice, well documented, that was taking place in that state, where there was a form of abortion where a woman was induced to give labor and deliver a baby prematurely, and then the baby was left to die because it was neglected. And this law simply said that a baby born alive in the state of Illinois would be treated as a person under the Constitution of the United States, would be treated as a human being and an individual. Now, President Obama opposed that law. He was the primary opponent of it. Would you support that law?
I signed a law in New Mexico banning late-term abortion.
Okay.
I signed a law banning late-term abortion, believing there is a point of viability. And I also, as governor of New Mexico, supported parental notification. I've also always supported counseling.
Okay, so you believe women can kill their baby up to a certain point in pregnancy.
You're using terms here that are very, very offensive to women that have to make these kinds of decisions.
Is the baby alive before it's aborted? Does the abortion kill the baby?
I signed a bill banning late-term abortion, believing that there is a point of viability.
This is the last question I'll ask you about this, Governor. So do you believe that the instant before viability, as you call it, that unborn child does not have a God-given right to life that is the duties of the state to protect, and that on the other side of that magical moment of viability, that the child does have a God-given right to life that it is the duty of the state to protect.
My choice as a human being would be to not have an abortion. But my position when it comes to you as a woman, that this is a decision that only you should be making.
So if viability is pushed back to the moment of conception, then you would then you would
Well,
ban abortion.
this would be a scientific issue that I think this is where the issue is moving.
So
is moving scientifically to actually assert or to establish that.
So in your logic, the right to life isn't something inalienable that comes from God. It's something that's going to be determined by the advance of biological science and being able to sustain.
I think this is where the issue.
Sustain an unborn child. The right to life is determined by science's ability to sustain the individual outside the womb.
Well, or science moves to the point that back to information that this is the point.
Scientific development can shift the moment at which a person gets a God-given right to life that the state has to protect.
Look, we disagree.
Let's talk about marriage. Obviously, what marriage is and how the state is going to recognize marriage is a huge question in America today. And the state of New York recently legalized same-sex marriage. Do you think that states should legally recognize marriages between people of the same gender?
I think the government should support gay unions. I think government should get out of the marriage business, leave marriage to the churches. But gay individuals being civilly united, that is something that I support.
What's the difference between a gay union and a gay marriage?
Just that marriage seems to get everybody really man and woman. Well, okay. If marriage is if this is an issue that really concerns you, I think it ends up being an issue that concerns you on a religious level. That here's what God mandated, if you will, and so leave marriage to the churches.
Well, you said your view is do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and I mentioned that Thomas Aquinas believed that really the first rule of the natural law was do no harm. Do you think a newborn baby, when it's born, that is a good thing or a bad thing or a neutral thing for that baby to have a mother?
I would think it would be a good thing.
It's a good thing for the baby to have a mother.
Yes.
So if the state were to come and to remove the mother from the baby and deny the mother to the baby, which was a good thing, you said, for the baby, is that something the state is doing that harms the baby, or is that of benefit to the baby?
Well, these are the issues that we have when it comes to the state, and Terry, I think I've immersed myself in these kinds of issues as governor of New Mexico. I understand how government makes some horrible mistakes.
Well, you think it's a good thing for, if I understood you think it's a good thing for a newborn baby to have a mother. Okay, that's a good thing. So then if the state were to come and by some means remove the mother from the child and deny the mother to the child, that would be harmful to the baby? That would be a wrongful thing for the state to do?
Well, generally speaking, yes, but there are exceptions to everything where a baby taken, I don't know where you're going with this, I have no idea. But there are exceptions to everything.
I just want to establish the premise that you believe that it's a good thing for a newborn baby to have a mother. Now, in states where they have same-sex marriage and recognize gay civil unions, and in some states where they don't, I believe, the state will take a baby and allow it to be adopted, will hand it over to a same-sex couple in an adoption. Will hand over a baby to two men who they say are married, rather than to a married couple where the child will have a mother and a father. Now, since you believe it's a good thing for a child to have a mother, do you think it's a good thing for the state to take a baby and hand it over to two men to raise?
Well, and I think that should be a state's issue, although I'm open to that being a federal issue from a civil rights standpoint.
For the baby?
Well, for the issue itself, talking about gay rights, talking about...
well, I'm talking about the right of the baby, though. If you're governor of New Mexico, someone said...
I guess I would ask you then, do you believe that you're born gay, or do you believe that this is something that you acquired?
I don't know for sure. I doubt that people are born gay, but I don't know. But I think that's irrelevant here. I think the question, it's not. The question
maybe
here-
not. What
question-
you may be thinking is that somehow this gay couple is going to turn this heterosexual individual into a
that's not-
homosexual individual.
That's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I'm following your logic, Governor, which I agree with, that it would be harmful that babies do need mothers. It is a good thing for a baby to have a mother. It's harmful to remove a mother, for the state to deny a child a mother is not good, and it's harmful to the baby. And
I don't know of any gay couples. I know of no gay couples that I dislike, that aren't good human beings.
That's not the issue, Governor. The issue is
but what you're talking about is you're saying categorically that gay couples are incapable of raising a child, and I disagree with you.
I'm saying that if you take your premise that it is a good thing for a baby to have a mother, and if it's harmful for the state to take the mother away from the baby, for the state to say,
is it a good thing to have a baby born unto two?
No.
Would it be a good thing to have a baby in an environment where there were two loving parents? Yes, I think there would be.
Right. Okay. Well,
I think it would be.
So you believe the state has an interest in the traditional institution of marriage, because you think a mother and a father are both good things. Therefore you believe.
So I'm not discounting that a gay couple can't be a good influence on a child.
But the question is whether the state ought to use the power of government. Now, as I understand it, you don't like big government, but the state ought to use the power of government to take a baby, and rather than put it into a home where it has a mother and father,
look, I'll tell you, you're talking about an issue that is very complex. And by the way, I think government commits atrocities in that category.
Why is it complex? Two men cannot conceive a child. A man cannot gestate a child. Every child ever born had a mother.
You were talking earlier about the government taking a baby away from a mother and father environment. And I will tell you, the government commits atrocities when it comes to that category.
You concede it's a good thing for a child to have a mother. Yet if you're going in cases the government is making decisions that is to the benefit of the child. I'm just saying, in other cases they're making a decision that's in some cases it's a detriment. In some cases it's a good decision to be making. You're categorically. No, it seems to me you favor government. The power of government actually transforming the basic structure of society, which is the family.
No, not at all. Not at all. No,
an incredible act of big government.
I apologize. I apologize if I have made that premise. I'm sorry.
You would say to the newborn child, I won't force you to buy health insurance because that's abuse of government power. But I'm going to take you and hand you over to the same-sex couple, because even though I think it's a good thing for you to have a mother, I think the state can hand you over to two men and call those two men a marriage.
Well, and using your example, you're saying though that it's a better choice to hand that baby over to a male and a female as opposed to a same-sex couple.
Without question.
Okay.
Without question. All right. Now, you've gotten some notoriety for favoring the decriminalization of drugs. Now, let me ask you about heroin. Do you think that heroin should be legal in the United States of America?
So let me ask you this: are you familiar with Portugal and Portugal's experience when it comes to having decriminalized all drug use?
No.
10 years ago, Portugal decriminalized all drug use, and that was in lieu of them having a heroin epidemic. Over the last 10 years, Portugal has documented a 50% decrease in heroin use as a result of having decriminalized heroin. So it seems to fly in the face of what you would think would be logical.
So you favor legalizing heroin for utilitarian purposes?
No, I only favor legalizing marijuana. I espouse legalizing marijuana. Control it, regulate it, tax it. Half of what we spend on law enforcement.
Would the government sell it?
Would the government
Who would sell it?
No, I envision.
McDonald's?
Well, first of all, it would be 50 states. This would be left to the states, as is the distribution of alcohol. So I see it being very similar to the same distributions that alcohol is subject to.
So New Mexico could have a state store where people could go buy marijuana.
Could, but I would not want the government involved in state-run liquor. I would not want the government involved in state-run marijuana stores.
In your state. But you would leave it up to, if Virginia wanted to have
Sure.
state-run marijuana stores.
Just as
the state of Virginia could
just
sell
as they
marijuana.
do right now. Yeah.
Okay, now, heroin. What would you do about heroin?
Well, when it comes to all the other drugs, I think that what we should do is look at harm reduction strategies, which are really real, which in a nutshell look at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. We have the most effective policies in the world in this country for killing heroin addicts. Do we really want to kill heroin addicts?
So you believe it's not good for people to do heroin?
Right, exactly. It's not good to do heroin.
You don't want people to do heroin.
I don't want people to do heroin.
And you think the state has an interest in having policies that try and reduce the use of heroin in the United States of America?
I think what we have is an interest to reduce death, disease, crime, and corruption. All things that I would associate more with prohibition than the actual substances themselves.
But Governor, if I understand you correctly, you're not taking a laissez-faire attitude and saying anybody should be able to do heroin because that's their own business. You're not saying that. You think heroin, you think the consumption of heroin is a bad thing.
I do.
It's bad for the individual who does it?
Right, but what kills, Terry, what kills when it comes to heroin is quality, quantity unknown. They have a heroin maintenance program in Zurich, Switzerland. The chief of police from Zurich, Switzerland came to Albuquerque. This was in 2002. He said when they came out with a heroin maintenance program in Zurich, I've been in law enforcement my entire life. I was opposed to it. Everybody in law enforcement was opposed to this because death, disease, crime, corruption, they were going to skyrocket because they were going to make heroin free. He said, I am in Albuquerque here today to tell you that Zurich is a much better place to live today as a result of these programs.
But let me clarify your position, though. Are we starting with the premise that it is a bad thing and harmful for a person to do heroin? Or are you saying that it's only bad when a person does heroin immoderately and overdoses, takes too much or takes bad heroin?
You seem to be making that judgment. You seem to be making that judgment.
I think it's a bad thing for people to do heroin. I thought I heard you say it's not good.
I don't think it's good.
It's not
but
good.
do you want to kill the heroin addict? If you want to kill the heroin addict, give him a product that is quality, quantity unknown. You want to keep the heroin addict alive and then statistically give him a chance to go off of heroin? Because everybody that goes on heroin gets off of heroin if they can live long enough to do that, but they don't live long enough because they take product that is quality, quantity unknown. They die from overdose. Women are involved in prostitution. They steal. They use guns. They have disputes that are played out with guns rather than the courts.
So you believe that it's harmful to do heroin. It's harmful to the individual. It's harmful to society too? Is it harmful to society when people do heroin?
If you are doing heroin in the confines of your own home, doing no harm to anyone arguably other than yourself, do you belong in prison for a health problem that you have?
But you do concede it's harmful for individuals. They're harming themselves.
Yes.
Okay, are they harming the community around them? Their family, perhaps? Maybe their neighbors?
Well, yes, and guess what? Right. The harm emanates from prohibition, not from their actual use, it's from prohibition.
Well, that's what I want to know. So you don't think the actual act of taking heroin, perhaps being a heroin addict, the harm that does to you, it doesn't really do harm to you if you do it in the right quantity with high-quality heroin. It doesn't do harm to you.
Well, of course it does.
Okay.
But by harm to you, are you harming anyone else? No, you're not.
Not your spouse, not your children, not your parents.
Let's take the
not
comparison.
Not your classmates
let's
at
take
school?
the comparison of the heroin addict who is given heroin under a heroin maintenance program and the harm they do to their family, as opposed to it's illegal. You're going to go to prison, so you have to rob and you have to steal and you take money that would have gone to for your kids' shoes and you use it to buy heroin, as opposed to not having to do that.
So let me make sure I understand, because I'm not sure I do understand your position. Are you arguing that as long as an individual takes high-quality heroin in the right dose in a well-monitored way, that person is not harming himself.
That person
Or
is
the
doing
community-
less harm
Less
to
harm. Okay,
themselves.
so
Less
he-
harm
all right,
reduction.
all right, all right,
harm
all right.
reduction,
So
Terry.
you do think the consumption of heroin in and of itself is harmful to the person who consumes it. It's harmful to his family and
as I
neighbors.
do a lot of
Okay,
things,
all right.
like
And-
too many Coca-Colas.
But you want to say is let's surrender any effort to try and diminish and eradicate heroin consumption in our society.
Because we've done this now for 70 years and we now have 2.3 million people behind bars and we spend half of everything we spend on law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons on drug-related crime. Wow, let's double down. Let's double down. Let's put 4.6 million people behind bars.
Now, I know you're against redistribution of wealth. Now, the heroin, of course, would you grow it in the United States?
Look, I'm not advocating. I am not advocating legalizing heroin. I'm advocating legalizing marijuana.
Well, no,
when it
you're
comes to
not. Well, wait a minute now. Someone can use heroin in the United States if you're president or not.
No.
So you would
look.
You
We don't.
say
There
let's
are
keep it
harm
illegal.
reduction strategies, Terry, that exist
Right.
that minimize you as a heroin addict from dying being a heroin
All right,
addict.
so if someone tries to bring heroin in from, if you could rewrite all the drug laws in the United States, someone tries to bring heroin in from Mexico, what happens? Under your government, ideally.
Well, under my government, ideally, we would have legalized marijuana. So by legalizing marijuana, I think we just take giant strides toward rational drug policy
But
and
you're
a
not answering my
recognition.
question.
No,
Forget
I'm
marijuana.
not. I'm not.
No,
You're asking me what my policies would be, and I'm telling you.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you a very specific question. Massive amounts of heroin cross our border from Mexico every year. They're distributed in cities all across the United States. You're president of the United States, and you have a Congress that's willing to follow your drug policy. What happens when someone tries to bring heroin across the Mexican border into the United States?
Well, first of all, this should be a state's issue, not a federal government issue. I think the federal government has botched this. So I think there would be a lot less heroin crossing the border as a result of having legalized marijuana. That is my contention.
Now, Governor, I think you did recognize earlier that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the Commerce Clause, gives the federal government the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. You do concede that, right?
Yes, Terry.
All right. So when a drug trader takes heroin in Mexico and brings it into New Mexico, is that trade with a foreign nation?
I don't think it's trade. I think it's illegal. I'm not sure.
Well, why is it illegal? Isn't it illegal because the United States government has the power, the authority to protect our borders
I suppose
and
so.
to regulate interstate commerce? Okay, so you are not suggesting. So you don't think the federal government should restrict the flow of heroin into the United States from Mexico? Yes or no?
I think the reality will be less heroin coming over the border.
If
That will
what?
be the reality.
No, well, are you going to restrict it?
Well, we restrict it today, and you point out that it's in every city,
So-
that there's an unlimited flow of heroin coming across the border. So let's double down, Terry. Let's double down. Let's put 100 million people behind bars in this country, because that's how many people have broken our drug laws.
There's a lot of other bad things coming across our border, Governor, along with that heroin. Heroin also, by the
And
way.
what else is coming across the border that's bad?
Is coming out of Afghanistan. And it is, but I still don't understand. It's a very simple question. If you were president of the United States and you had a Congress that was willing to enact the kind of drug legislation you want, would people be permitted or prohibited from bringing heroin in the United States from foreign countries?
Well, prohibited.
Right.
Prohibited.
So you would
Yes.
prohibit the flow. Okay. Now, if you were governor of New Mexico again, and you had a legislature that would do what you wanted to do, would it be legal for some guy to sell heroin to another guy in Taos?
No.
Okay,
I don't
it'd be
think we know.
illegal. It'd be illegal.
Yes,
So you
yes.
you favor the prohibition of bringing heroin into the United
But
States.
what you're
and you,
failing
and you
to-
and you favor prohibiting it
But
being
what you're
sold
failing
in
to
your town.
recognize is the diminished marketplace that would exist
Okay.
if marijuana were legal.
So you're not in favor of legal heroin, but you think making
You think that making it illegal is going to make it go away? Have you been living in a box, my man?
You believe the facilitation of marijuana smoking in the United States by the government will diminish the amount of heroin consumed in the United
Yes,
States?
I do.
Why?
Because right now, prohibition is all about it's a prohibition phenomenon. It's cheap, it's easy to administer, it's a more powerful high. I think that the gateway aspect.
What's a more powerful high?
Heroin.
So you think the people who legally start smoking marijuana in Gary Johnson's America will be less likely to move on and use heroin than people who start smoking marijuana
I think
in
the
America today.
gateway aspect of marijuana is that the person that sells marijuana also sells harder drugs. When you take away that link, I'm going to suggest that there'll be less heroin use, as there was in Portugal. Portugal has documented a 50% decrease in heroin use over the last 10 years, having decriminalized heroin. Kerry, how do you explain that? Or are you just thinking that's a voodoo kind of a thing?
Governor Gary Johnson, appreciate you coming in. Good to talk to you.
Thank you very much.